What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Today, we're going to talk about why we Bebes kids and we don't die, we multiply. That's what we're going to talk about. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I hear a lot of chatter around the black YouTube space in some circles where they're worried about, like in America to be specific, some places they're worried about gentrification, right? They're worried about other people coming into their communities and changing the demographics of the community, right? Of the established African American community. They're worried about other people coming in, changing the demographics of that community. Now, me saying that, remember, European Americans right now on a national scale are also worried about other people coming in and changing the demographics of their communities, right? We call it racism, because that's the form it manifests itself, the way they want, because they're afraid of that thing. African Americans, we don't call it racism. It's more of a xenophobia, right? Ours is xenophobia. For the most part. Sometimes it can be racist, but we tend not to be able to really be categorized in the racist category because we don't have the power to change anybody or to do anything to anybody with, our prejudice. So ours is more of prejudice than racism. European Americans, they're racist because they can actually do something and they actually do things with their biases towards other people, right? So xenophobia, racism, tribalism, all that stuff is pretty much is all the same thing. It's just that because we are all kind of different, and that is what indicates what label that same thing is going to be called, depending on who it is that's having those type of feelings. But some black people believe that they have a population issue in America. They believe that America, because we're not having enough babies, maybe, right? Like basically the same sentiment that European Americans have in America, the same sentiment that Europeans have in Europe, the same sentiment that Europeans have in Australia, the same sentiment that Europeans have in South Africa, the same sentiment that Europeans have in South America where they live, the same sentiment that Europeans have in Central America where they live, the same sentiment of Europeans that live in the Polynesian Islands and in Hawaii where they live. All the children and offspring of the colonizers and the offspring of people who migrated there later, after those places were developed. Right. But some black people actually think that we have a population issue, and they feel like the same fears that European American has, we should have, because they're looking at it from a national point of view, meaning African Americans, we're Africans and we're American. Right. So we put our value in Africa, us being black and African, because that's our origin. That's our place. Right. So we stake claim to that. But also, we are also American, despite how we were forced to be American, despite the history, despite how bad the history is, how this country was formed, the country was still formed, right? So as great as this country is, it's, the credit for that, a lot of that is with African Americans. We participated in it willingly or unwillingly, right, to build this nation, right? And we're not willing to give that up because we're just as much American, if not more American than any other group of people in this country, because African Americans actually, for the most part, we have been the only examples of what it is to be a true American. Those ideals of what America is supposed to be, the ideals of what an American is supposed to be, African Americans embody that, because we have been the forgiving ones. We have been hurt, but we didn't seek revenge afterwards. We have been the ones that have been most inclusive. We participated and built with our blood, sweat, and tears the foundation of this country. We fought in every single war that this country ever had, including the wars that created this country when they brought all those African buffalo soldiers to beat the Native Americans and take over the land. It was African Americans once again recruited as human weapons of mass destruction to rid North America of Native Americans. The Europeans didn't do it. It was the Africans that did it. It was the Buffalo Soldiers who are the ones who are the architects of the physical destruction of Native Americans, just like some Native Americans also participated in the transatlantic slave trade. African Americans physically participated, and mostly we are the ones who eliminated physically, who were the soldiers in the genocide of the Native Americans. That's real history, right? Even though we were coerced, or some of us were mercenaries, some of us were forced to do it, some of us had no choice to do it, just like most people join the military because it's an option, right? To better your life, to see the world, to get a leg up on life. It's always been the same since there's been a thing called a military or a mercenary force or whatever, right? But that's real history. But so with all that being said, African Americans are just as much American, and we don't throw that away, even though we know we are also African. And we don't have to. We can have two things at once. It's just our mindset sometimes makes us believe we can only have one thing. We can only be African. We can only be American. We can only have one nationality, not two. But we can have two. And to be honest, our version of America is not the same version of America that Europeans live in. Our version is Africa America. It's us Africans in America is our America. So us including Africa within that fold only makes sense and only benefits us and those people who are our families on the continent, right? But let's get back to this population thing and why I don't really care. I don't really trip when I see the attempts of or gentrification, or when people say, or population, specifically African American population is going down or whatever, which is actually not true. African Americans, from the amount of Africans brought over to the North America, there wasn't that many of us. Like, there was a few million that they brought over from Nigeria, right? The thing is, y'all got to keep in mind that the transatlantic slave trade was a 500-year endeavor, but America, what we consider North America, there were no slaves here for the first roughly around 300 years. So slavery was going on for about 300 years, roughly, before any significant slaves actually landed in North America, because most of it was happening in South America, in Central America, and they made their way up to the Caribbean and North America later. That's how we know that most African Americans are by way of Nigeria and Benin and Ghana, is because we have the documentation in the National Archives. You can look the documentations up. They have the receipts of the ships and everything, right? The names of the captains. This stuff was cataloged because this was capitalism. This was a business. You understand, right? So you got to understand. And then the piracy, the movies, how we make pirates, and you have the Pirates of the Caribbean. There was a real time where there was such thing as pirates, and most of the time pirates were just mercenaries. They were African slaves mixed with European indentured services and European like vagabonds or whatever. The lowest common denominator of the British and other European empires who made it to escape, who truly wanted to escape. They went to the Caribbean. But a lot of Africans were participated in those times where piracy was a big thing, and that's how the Caribbean islands got established. They were basically hubs of transport, goods and services. So a lot of some of the greatest and most feared pirates in that era were African people, right? There's a wealth of history that a lot of people don't even consider when it comes to Africans and our participation in this global expansion of humanity and people, right? But when it comes to population, we as Africans don't have a problem, because despite what people think, you got what people think, and then you got what's really happening, right? So no matter how you feel about it, it's happening, whether you believe it's evil or good, whether you believe you're on the right side of history or not, however you feel about it, those are just personal feelings. Everybody has feelings. But the thing is, what's happening is true, and there's nothing, no matter how you feel about it, it's still going to happen. It's just a matter of how you're going to deal with it, right? So let me break it down to you and tell you why you don't have to worry about gentrification, why you don't have to, as a black African American, why you don't have to worry about your population at all. right? So those issues are not issues that we have, because we're baby kids. We don't die, we multiply. All right. First of all, we're Africans, right? So we have all. I'm gonna start from the beginning. So that way, the way I'm gonna explain it is so at the end of this, you should totally understand, right? Okay. So we Africans, we have all the genetic material necessary to create every human being on the planet, right? Only African people have that. That is something unique to Africans. And when we say we are the most diverse group of of people on the planet, you have to understand what that actually means, because we say it all the time, but nobody actually thinks really hard about what are the implications of that statement. What does that actually mean, and how does that impact us to this day, right? And how people view us. We African people are the most genetically diverse groups of people on the planet. We live in, like, most of the arable earth. You look at the true, if you knew the true landmass of Africa, you would see how overwhelmingly large it is. And when you see the greenery, you would see how overwhelmingly lush it is, with all the necessary materials necessary for a human population to grow and thrive and accomplish all the things that we accomplished, right? It's a very favorable place for humanity. As you can see, it's still the center of resource for the planet, right now, right? Everybody wants everything, including the humans that come from this place, because of all the richness of which we are from, the land in which we are from. It's rich, and we are rich as people, right? So we have all the genetic code to create all humanity. That means every other group, they don't have all the necessary pieces to the puzzle. So you need to have you need to have us. That's why a black boy just recently, they had I think he was the first guy, because sickle cell was very common in African originated people. And that's something we suffer from, but other groups of people do suffer from it too. But they needed a black person, because we have all of the genetic material, because if you can cure it from a black person, you can cure it from everybody, right? So that's just an example how us having all the material benefits humanity still. That's why they did a lot of experiments on us, because of our wealth of genetic material, to create a lot of these drugs and stuff that the whole world uses today, right? So since we have the entire puzzle, and our skin is perfectly adapted for this planet, whether cold, believe it or not, whether cold or hot, right? Our skin is perfectly adapted because we have it all, right? And also we have the numbers. So Africa has the numbers. We as people, we as numbers of people of African origin, we are very large, right? We're a very large population. So we have the densest genetic material, and we have the largest population. If you add all of us up together and you compare that with other groups of people, we always say Asians, but if you look at Asians, even them, they're different. They're kind of have extreme differences of Asians, right? Extreme differences, like Indians and Han Chinese are clearly two different things, right? Indians, technically, they should be more closely connected to us. In Southeast Asians are more closely connected to Africans genetically than they even are Northern Asians. A lot of people don't know that. That's why people from Thailand are more genetically connected with Africans than they are connected with Northern Chinese people. They're more connected with us than even though you may assume, you would think they would be more genetically connected with them, but they're more genetically connected with us. That's why they have a lot of our features. A lot of the Southern Africans still maintain African features along the equator, right? So in America, it's the Europeans and their populations that have an existential crisis because of the systems in which they live in. It doesn't create a conducive atmosphere for people to have multiple children. We don't live in a society that requires us to have multiple children, right? Because it used to be the children were the foundation of the family. The family itself was in a trade or whatnot, and they needed children because the children are the ones that was going to work that trade. That's how we used to operate, right? But now we operate in a different system, which, doesn't require a person to have 15 children, right? So that's the Europeans, that's the way they operate, right? But the thing is, the rest of the world don't operate like that, and Africa don't really operate like that, and they have not had to adjust to that type of system per se, because their systems and the environment itself, and the abundance of resources, despite poverty, still it still allows you to be an environment which you can have all those children and still live and maintain, right? Like, imagine having 15 children in America right now. Even if you was a millionaire, imagine how much that would still cost. But you have people have 15 children in Africa, and there's no problem. They make much less. It makes much less than the average American. Yet they have a way to take care and feed all their children. Right? They can still do that. So the environment makes it so African people can still multiply. No matter how many times in history Europeans have attempted to eliminate us, they just, for some reason, if you notice, it just doesn't work. That just goes to show you how amazing Africans are and resilient we are at surviving just about anything, right? We've survived massive genocide, right? We've survived 300, 400, 500 years of a continuous insurgence from a warrior class group of humans who are very aggressive, and we know what they do culturally. We survive and still are surviving and multiplying despite having to be at war with those type of human beings. We've survived being chemically attacked, biologically attacked, with insertion of things like AIDS and other diseases that Europeans brought in when they introduced themselves to us. Keep in mind, remember, the Native Americans, the first thing that wiped them out, outside of the military campaigns of the Buffalo Soldiers and the Africans, including the Moors that came with the Spaniards, because they were mercenaries. Because remember, we were a warrior class. You gotta remember, transatlantic slave trade started relatively soon after the Moors were defeated in Spain by the Europeans. When they were defeated in Spain by the Europeans, that, like, shortly after that, the transatlantic slave trade started. So we had 700 plus years of Moorish control of Spain and Europe, right? Then a few hundred years later, right, all of a sudden the Europeans found out about the new Americas by the Moors, who were already going over to the Americas, and it was a Moor, a black person, who took them over to America as the navigator. And even Christopher Columbus had a Moor who was the navigator, right? So we understand that Africans have always been participation in world travel, right? Clearly, because we the ones who populated the entire planet. So we started it and we never stopped, right? Despite the history that was destroyed by the Europeans, because when they go somewhere, they destroy everything. Unfortunately, that's what they do, right? But the thing is, we have our homeland, right? So we have our homeland, right, which is Africa. Despite the incursions in the 500 years of invasions, we still dominate and populate our homeland. Despite the Arabs coming over, lightening up, browning up the north, we still overwhelmingly dominate our homeland, which is not something that Europeans can say, because of the politics of their people and how they've been running the world. The side effects is that the places that they went to go subjugate and colonize, those people have now went to their countries and have been populating and overwhelming them in population, right? So all of the Europeans' colonies, Europeans are currently being overwhelmed by the very same people they subjugated. So they have to deal with that. And the thing is, they don't have the genetic disposition to be able to defeat that. So they're doing everything they can politically and economically to encourage their people to have more children, to make more babies, and to at least have babies with their own kind, to add, to keep the population going, i.e. Donald Trump saying they're poisoning the blood of our nation. What it meant was brown people are coming in and they're making white people disappear. That's what that means. Say the Jews meant Hitler meant it when he said it that way. When he saw all those brown people coming in from other portions of Europe and Asia coming in, and other people who weren't Anglo-Saxon white, he said these people are coming in, and by mixing with us, they're going to genetically wipe us out. Europeans in America feel like they're genetically being wiped out by everybody. They can't outright say it, so they have to make excuses by immigration and taking my jobs, and they have to talk around it because they can't really say what they mean. But in reality, they mean these brown people are coming over and they're taking over the place that's supposed to belong to us, and our population is not big enough to fight back over time, right? So there's not enough Europeans to gentrify any place. And even if Europeans do move into that place, it's only a matter of time before they either they just don't have enough babies and they move and they just disappear, or they integrate into whatever community that they're living in, and they become part of the fold, right? And here's another thing people worry about. They worry about all the mulattoes, right? The mixed people, right? The people who are mixed, and that's the new group, right? I want you guys to understand this is not the first time that this happened. Since Africans have crossed the world and established all these other races, we have been trading with each other for thousands and thousands of years, and we have been mixing for thousands and thousands of years. It's not a new phenomenon, and it's not something that anybody should be alarmed at. It's just, that's what happened. People mix. You can't help who you love. You can't help who you want to be with. It just is what it is, despite how you personally feel about it, personally, because what you feel about it personally doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things, because human beings are human beings, and they're going to mix with who they want to mix with, depending on where they are, period. That's just what's going to happen, right? But the thing about it is, African people population is so massive, and our genetic disposition is so powerful compared to everybody else, and we have all the genetic code, meaning we have all the pieces. When we create mulattoes like the Arabs you see now, right? The Arabs you see, understand that when we talk about the Arab slave trade and we talk about all that stuff, understand we're still talking about Europeans, because Arabs actually, the original Arabs were black. The original word for Arab was a word that came out of Egypt, and it was talking about Libyans, it was talking about nomadic people. The original Arabs are black, and the original Arabs are still there. They are Africoid people. They're nomadic, like the Fulani. They're African. That area that you see, those light-skinned, brown, almost white Arabs, those are the family mixed. Those are the mixed Europeans that came down to fight the Muslims, the original Muslims who used to practice the original form of Islam before it morphed into these various different denominations, like all the other religions that morphed into different denominations, religions. These things, those people were black, but because that was the trading post between Asia, European, and Africa, those people mixed up. So they're just a combination of Europeans, Africans, and Asians, but majority Europeans, Asians. That's why they look that way. That's why if you look at a mulatto, right? They look the same. Look, they could be Arab, they could be Spanish. You can see them in Dominican. It ain't nothing. There's only a few combinations on this planet. You got Asian, African, Europeans. That's it. That's it. Asian, African, European mix. Africoid, Asiatic, and European. That's it. You mix them up. You put them in America. They're mulatto, mixed race, golden people, whatever they want to call themselves. If they're born in the Middle East, you're gonna call them an Arab, right? If you put them in Dominican Republic, you're gonna call them a Dominican. Put them in Brazil, they're gonna be called a Brazil. But it's the same genetic mix. And the thing is, Africans don't have to worry about anything, but because I have a good analogy to explain it for you guys. Even if we create this new group of people in America, right? Well, they're not a new group of people. There's going to be the same mix of Arabs, right? Asian, black, white, but mostly black, white combo. You have a generation, we're going to have a large generation of these people, right? These mixed people who I know a lot of African people say, oh, they're not truly black. I personally, I'm not going to tell somebody what they're not. And I don't believe ever Africans have the right to tell other African people who are half black and they identify with their black side and they respect and honor the culture. I don't believe we have the right to tell them they're not African, because somebody who's 100% African and don't have any colonizer blood in them can also say the same thing about us if we want to start measuring things. So me personally, I don't have a purity test, but I do understand some people are so far off the spectrum. It's like, come on, bro. Like, come on, bro. Right. But we also have some people that's pitch Nigerian, Sudanese black that got the whitest mentality on the planet, and they definitely are not our brothers. Okay, so keep that in mind. And they definitely don't identify with us at all, right? But in the real world, African people don't got nothing to worry about it, because when you get a bunch of mulattoes, what happens what do you think is going to happen when the Europeans disappear as a white race and they all become the mixed yellow mulattoes? Now, who are they going to pick to marry? Who's that generation going to pick to marry, to procreate with? Because there won't be any option to pick white. There won't be no option. The only option per number will be either more mulattoes, more mixed people, or more black people. And then you're gonna have a generation of the parents of mulattoes and more black people. They're gonna come out and they're gonna receive more. They're gonna receive more genetic code from that African, and then that generation that comes, their children is gonna be mostly African. They're gonna have a black African parent and a mulatto parent. That's gonna become a trend. It's unavoidable, right? So that means those children will come out and they're gonna identify mostly with their black side because they're gonna be predominantly black. They're gonna be 3/4 black, right? You're gonna have a whole generation of 3/4 black children, right? And this is, of course, this is not all within our lifetimes, but understand this is how it's gonna happen, right? So we're gonna have another generation of about 3/4 black that they're definitely gonna identify with Africans and black, because by that time African will have risen to the point to where Africa will be the center of the world, center of power in the world. So there will be no all this racism and this purposeful discrimination. All that should be out the window by that time. All that stuff will be in history books. You understand? All that's gonna be in history books. All the shit we fighting about now, that's all gonna be in trash. All this tribalism stuff we talking about now, that's not even gonna be a thing. All this stuff we dealing with, that's gonna be stuff people study in college. Trust and believe, we're gonna be history to these people, right? So that generation that's 3/4 African, who are they gonna mix with? They're gonna mix with other African people. They ain't gonna be who's left. And then we're gonna be mixed with more Asians, right? But the same thing happens over there, because keep in mind, we have all the code. And when we mix, even if we dilute ourselves, we're not really diluting ourselves. Because remember, the more the mixed people mix with black people, the more the 3/4 mix with black people, you're simply putting the puzzle back together. The genetic code is coming back home, right? Because guess what? There's going to be another generation. And that generation is going to be 3/4 black. They're going to end up getting back with more black people. Then you got yourself a whole African. And then there will be no mixing, because African people would have simply reabsorbed the humans that we created when we splintered and mutated as we traveled this planet over the millennia. And at some point after this same cycle continues, as we reabsorb everybody else, because we like, if you know anything about anime, we like Majin Buu. There's nothing you can do to us to actually kill us. And once we reabsorb you, we just taking back what's already ours. We're gods on earth. We can't be destroyed. We have the numbers. We have the genetic. Advantage over everybody. So yes, we will dilute ourselves, but by diluting ourselves is really throwing out a wide global cast net to bring everybody back in and basically turn everybody back into Africa. We're gonna reabsorb every single person, because African people, we don't die, we continue to multiply. By 2050, 1 in 5 persons on the planet, 1 in 5 persons on the planet is going to be an African. What population could overcome those overwhelming odds? What population on the planet? Not even the Chinese and the Indians are going to be able to overwhelm that. The Indian, it won't take nothing but 2-3 generations of Indians mixing with Africans before we reabsorb Indians and back into the African fold, because they're damn near right there. They're not that far off. We can reabsorb them within a few generations, and they'll be right back to African. They won't be Indian. They'll be African again. Everybody's gonna get the business genetically. It is only a matter of time. All Africans got to do is be able to just continue to keep doing what we're doing. We don't have to worry about our future is secured. All we have to do is make sure the planet is still here for us to use. Every country, every nation on this planet is going to be ours one day, the way it was when we first populated. And see, that's an actual fact. And that's what happens when you're looking at the whole picture. All we have to do is create the future we want to live in when it's all us. Because when it's all us, ain't going to be no excuses. Because there ain't going to be a race issue. It ain't going to be, it ain't going to be a national issue. Because by the time we meld that much, the world will have gotten smaller and smaller. We'll probably be able to get to freaking from Washington D.C. to South Africa. I'll probably get there in 45 minutes. Who knows? There's so much technology being developed now that we as Africans are going to be absorbing all that intellectual knowledge as we have no choice but to move into these fields because it'll be required. Countries need population now. That's why while you're upset that there's illegal immigration, the people who run the country know that they need people in the country because they need people to work. There's not enough people in this country to work and do the jobs that's necessary to run these nations, these vast empires that are on this planet. That's what you don't understand. In the real world, countries are scrambling for population. And guess what? Africa has plenty of them. So no matter how many people japa, no matter how many people do that, there'll still be plenty of Africans in Africa to run the institutions that's being developed right now to create massive economies in metropolitan areas to catch up to the rest of the industrialized nations. And we're going to start feeling all these other nations because they're going to need the workers. They're going to need the labor. They're going to need the people in their countries to pay the taxes to keep their federal governments running, or these countries are going to start shutting down. Because no matter what, if you ain't got people to run the country, you can't have a country. You understand? So African people, we don't got nothing to worry about. And it doesn't matter if you FBA, if you ADOS, it doesn't matter if you want to call yourself a freedman. It don't matter if you pretending, you want to keep believing that. Hey, look, at some point, you're going to have everything anyway. At some point, you're going to have everything. At some point, you will be able to say you are the indigenous population of North America. They're going to have to go real far back to see when anybody on the planet used to look anything other than an African. That point, we're going to get to that point. And we're going to be in the history books. They're going to be blowing dust off. We're going to be the ancients at some point. Remember that in Africa, our ancient ancestors were studying their ancient ancestors. That's how old Africans are. Our ancient ancestors were studying their ancient ancestors. We're the only people who got ancient ancestors that were studying their ancient ancestors. Think about that. Let me say that again. African people are the only people that have ancient ancestors that were also studying their ancient ancestors. That's deep. Yeah, so I don't want anybody to worry about gentrification. Don't worry about period time situations like Roe v. Wade getting turned over, abortion. Don't worry about that stuff. I mean, there's people, it's an issue of the day. I understand you have feelings about it, but in the grand scheme of things, it don't mean nothing. It's not our fight. It's not something we really got to worry about. Listen, only like a few million Africans. This is the thing. Only a few million Africans were brought to North America. It wasn't like Brazil in Central America and South America. We multiplied into this 45, 55, whatever number that I think they have. We probably bigger than that because I made a video. They think there's a lot more of us than they say, but we multiplied into that from like a few million guys. See, white people look at it. Why do you think they've been trying to kill us? Because we've been no matter what they do. The reason why we don't have universal health care in this country, the whole reason why white people are suffering in this country because in the middle of America and they can't afford health care and they gotta work paycheck to paycheck, and if they're one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. The reason why American people suffer in this country is simply because they'll chop their arm off. They will kill themselves just to injure us. Because they know no matter what they do, we continue to multiply. The whole reason we don't have universal health care, because we can afford it, of course. We can afford it because they don't want African Americans to have health care, because then we would multiply even further. Africans are not meant to be over here. That's why we have vitamin D deficiency, because we don't get this. We in environments where our skin is not being utilized to its maximum capacity. We're not supposed to be in these winters. That's why if we were supposed to be in these winters, right? The people that made it here thousands of years ago would have looked like Africans still, because they wouldn't have had to adapt to this environment. We're not adapted to this environment. We're a tropical people. We're supposed to be in the heat. Our skin didn't have time to adapt to this. That's why we have difficulties with our vitamin D. Our skin is not meant, or we're supposed to sweat. Our bodies, that's why we're not as hairy as Europeans. Our bodies is meant to sweat in the sun, and that's how we get rid of a lot of the toxins in our body. That's why That's why we have issues like high blood pressure. It's not just because our eating habits and things like that. It's because we sweat more than Europeans. We sweat more than Northern Asians. And because we sweat, we dehydrate faster. Concentrations of salt in our body rises because our salt is leaving our body. We sweat out water and leaving high concentrations of salt in our blood. That's why we're in environments we don't belong in. We don't get the sun like we're supposed to. That's why we're sick over here. That's why we're not indigenous. If we was indigenous, our bodies would have adapted. If we was here for thousands of years, we'd have had enough time to adapt to this environment. We wouldn't have these issues. And we're doing things like drinking milk. We have too many European portions of our diet that's not conducive for our African bodies. That's why when you go to Africa and eat the very same foods that we eat over here as African Americans, but you buy those ingredients in Africa and you make your food, you can eat all you want. You don't get fat like that because the food is real. In Africa, they still got seeds in their food. That's what I'm saying. That's why you go to Africa to heal. Why do you think they say go to Africa to heal? Because you literally healing your body from genetically all the way down to everything is healing when you're there, because you're in your natural habitat and your body can operate the way it was meant to operate. That's why Caribbeans, their body's skin looks so good, and that's why they're usually more healthier than us, because they're in the equator. They're in the places where their body was meant to operate. We ain't meant to be wearing all these goddamn clothes and having all these winters and covering our bodies up. That's why black people don't like wearing clothes any goddamn way. We don't like wearing clothes. We always naked. You look in Africa, they naked. You look at the ancient Egyptians, they naked. Look at what we call ghetto over here. It's just women being naked with color. Everything's naked. We naked everywhere. That's what we are. We ain't meant to wear clothes. There's just certain people that just be naked. And then we equate being naked as primitive. You equate armor and having a bunch of shit on as sophisticated. That's why when you look at Europeans and they wearing armor and you see all this stuff, you look at medieval times and knights and stuff. Oh, look at that weaponry there. They got all that stuff. They look how sophisticated they are. And they made us believe that. But why the hell would I wear all that shit in Africa? That's hot. That wouldn't make any sense. It's stupid. I'd rather, why, you look at Europe and you see them wearing all these fancy gowns and you see all the robes. They need that shit. It's cold, right? So they just decorate that shit. But you think that a queen over there in Europe is more prestigious because she got all this shit on, right? And you see a queen in Africa and maybe she ain't got all that shit on. You're like, see, look at that. They in the bush. No, it's fucking hot. You want to wear all that shit? Hell to all. I'm just going to make the shit I got look shiny, but I'd rather be naked because that's just how we are, right? But I just want you guys to keep in mind, African people, we ain't got nothing to worry about. And listen, Europeans, on top of that, because they separated themselves to the point to where they can't even replenish each other. There's not enough Europeans that can replace the Europeans in America. Why you think Europeans in America want to bring some Ukrainians over here? They trying to get some genetic diversity. We know they have issues with that already, right? We know they have genetic diversity issues within their community, right? We make fun of it sometimes, right? So what you think is going to keep happening as they keep folding in the same genetic codes over and over again with the ever smaller population? They got issues, okay? And there's not enough Europeans to say that want to come to America. Because if you live in any part of Europe, you're probably living better than you would be moving to America, because our system is more capitalistically vicious than theirs over there, right? You ain't got a lot of Europeans say, I'm going to go to Australia and move over there, that little strip that they can barely handle getting blood. They can't, they're straight, they want to go over there and get skin cancer. They're not meant to be in the sun like that. That's why when they go to places that's in the equator, the skin burns up over time. That's why their skin get all dry and crackly as they get older. When the beach culture in California and Florida and the surfer lifestyle and those people living in that. That's why their skin look like that. They ain't meant to be out there like that, huh? That's why they get skin cancers. The sun kills them. They ain't meant to be out in the sun like that, right? So even if a bunch of Europeans were to move, if all of them were to move to Africa, guess what? That's not their environment. They ain't never been too comfortable over there unless you had the modern trappings of technology. They really need that stuff. They can't just, they're gonna need to make bubbles like we moving into Mars. If they try to all flock to Africa, look, all of them they need luxury. They need that. They can't go out there in that sun like that. Huh? Why you think they making things like you can take a shot with melanin? They trying to make it so they can survive. Because it's getting hotter. The environment is cool with us. It ain't cool for them. You know what I'm saying? So So you got to understand that we are at an advantage when it comes to, we're good. We're good. We don't have nothing to worry. And then it's the great thing about it is that we have plenty of genetic diversity. So we don't have to worry about having, too many problems when it comes to interbreeding, because we're the most diverse group of people on the planet. And you know what I find funny? Listen to this. We are the most diverse people on the planet, meaning we have all the phenotypical characteristics of every type of person on the planet, because we carry all of those phenotypical traits. Every eye color, every hair texture, every cheek structure, every head frame, every body frame, every height, every size, everything. So it's actually laughable that any European or Asian or the first mixed people, Arabs, can say that anybody looks like them. It's laughable to say that any group of Africans look like any other group of human beings on the planet. It's laughable because they don't have the genetic diversity to have many different phenotypical looks. Europeans, for the most part, have a few different looks. A few. Asians, they have a few different looks. A few different phenotypical looks. Latinos, who ain't nothing but the new mixed people before the mulatto. They all the same over here. American mulattoes, Mexicans who they're basically Native Americans who forgot that they Native Americans and they rather just be Mexican or a Salvadoran. They got big issues with their people over there. They don't identify who they really are. They think speaking Spanish is a point of pride when speaking English. And you just speaking two colonial languages. You don't speak your own, right? They still got to find themselves, But they might be running out of time because, like I said, their population is not even big enough. They can't. Everybody's getting absorbed. Everybody. It's going to be the same cycle. We're going to create mulattoes. Those mulattoes, our numbers going to continue to grow. African people are going to continue to spread to every single point on this planet, and will continue to, as the Europeans say, poison the blood of their nations. Okay? But in actuality, what we're doing, we're blessing all of them with our genetic code. It's a blessing for them. And some people actually see it that way. There are people in other countries who see exactly what I just said now. They understand that African people has a superior genetic code. They have it all. And they seek out actively to create children that have that code. And that is a problem in these countries too, because there are Asian people on the internet now actively campaigning for their women to mate with black men. And there are Europeans right now doing exactly the same thing on TikTok, on social media, saying, go get yourself a black man because they're the total package genetically and they're strong and this and that. If you look at all the reasons why other people admire us, those are all the reasons why they're women naturally, by nature, want to recreate with the most dominant gene, the gene that's most likely to survive. That's what nature always does that. Nature always creates its female to find the male that's going to give it the most robust genetic code to survive. And we as animals are no different. So women, they just want to find the genes that's going to give the best children that have the best likelihood to succeed and survive on this earth. So it's just how we express that as human beings who think we're better than animals. We do it in various different ways. But at the end of the day, we still got to follow the rule of nature, right? And we're just like animals. We do what animals do, right? But anyway, I just want to let you guys know, we ain't got no problems when it comes to population. We got no problems when it comes to who gonna have the keys to all these nations at some point, at some time. Who's gonna have the keys? Who's gonna be running the show? It's just that on the way there, what kind of future do we want? Because we're the ones who's gonna be building it. Okay? Anyway, that's all I got to say. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.